Hey everyone, Livy here, back with another video. The time has finally come to discuss the kings, which are the last of the court cards, but certainly not the least. They're a set that I have to say early on were easy to relate to the most because I already talked about this in my intro video, but I did a lot of studying of different kings, not just through history, but also in literature, right? There's so many tales, both real and fantastical, about the rule of kings. Some have been, cowardly. Some of them are tyrants. Others are fair and just, showing that, there's so many different ways for a person to rule over a kingdom. So leadership in general, right, is no easy thing. So again, it was kind of easy for me to understand an archetype so focused on being the leader. Like, again, there's just many different examples throughout literature and such that go over it, that it was kind of easier for me was starting out to, get a hold of that energy. But like the queens, I am going to ask you to dismantle your gendered assumptions of the kings going into this, okay? This is not just a court for men, as it's been traditionally seen, but, it's anybody could be the king, basically. One of the biggest reasons, too, that I think people should see the kings differently is because if we just say, oh, well, the kings are just for wise old men, then, we kind of fall under some rather kind of bigoted and or maybe just more discriminatory trappings, right? And what I mean by that, of course, is assuming that only men can rule, right? Or be leaders or masters of their suit, since the kings, right, are the masters of the court cards and the different suits, right? The wands, the cups, the pentacles, swords, all of that, right? Also because the kings elementally, right, as I've already discussed, they're the suit of air, which we know is usually associated with the swords, and the swords, right? They rule our thoughts, the mind in general, and logic. So maybe you guys can see where I'm going here, but making the assumption that only men or male presenting people can be logical and in control of their thoughts is kind of obviously awful and divisive. Like it doesn't help anyone at all. So, and it also just, for men, like, I could see this sucking too, because it kind of perpetuates, ideas of toxic masculinity by telling us that man can't be in touch with their emotions, and therefore they're not capable of being of another alignment, right? Like the queens or the knights or the pages, like I discussed beforehand, right? So for that reason, right, I'm going to urge you to see the kings as anyone of any age, just like the other core cards I've already discussed. So sorry I had to mention that so early on, but it's really important, right, to get that out of the way, because it just makes what you're going to see make a lot more sense, right? And it's also important to point out that while the kings are masters of their suit, I'm not trying to say they're perfect or incapable of making mistakes either, right? It just means that they've reached a certain level of control with the suit they rule. So with that out of the way, we're now going to get into each king individually. So give me 1 second. Okay, we're going to start today by talking about the King of Wands, which is both air and fire, elementally. Interestingly, being air and fire also mirrors, right, the Knight of Swords. But the difference between, I would say in my opinion, the difference between the King of Wands and the Knight of Swords is, in my opinion, just that the king has learned to temper their fire, while the knights can sometimes burn just a little too brightly, right? Depending on the words that they say. It doesn't mean that the king can't have moments of rage. Every time I think of the King of Wands, I do think of someone very passionate. It's just that they've learned how to temper that down a bit, Also, sorry about my lighting. It's an awful time of day to film, but it is what it is. Anyways, The King of Wands is, like I said earlier, they're also the master of their suit, which means they have learned how to balance out how they pursue their creative endeavors, their energy, and even their priorities, right? They may also not be as active now in the actual act of creating. So that's going back to the idea that I mentioned in my intro video of this series about the king being more passive too, right? The kings needed to be protected. You know, they had their own throne, all that jazz. They're not actively doing the things they would have done as younger people, right? It's for that reason too that the keyword I like to associate with the King of Wands is the patron, because there's someone who wants to see others keep their humanity by giving back and kind of mentoring others in how to pursue those goals. They might even be someone who likes to donate a lot to creative endeavors because they know that by having those things around, it also benefits them and their own enlightenment and just the world in general. I also see them kind of as someone who, when they do get their fire lit, they do it intentionally and exactly without as much burning of everything down around them. Although, like the other figures of suit, I do see them having like passion though, so don't confuse that. But to show this idea a little bit better, we're going to look at some tarot examples of this. So you're going to see what's interesting is when I was finding cards, the wands, the King of Wands, for some reason, I was very picky with, and I only have like so many, but you're going to see there's a lot more for like the rest of them. But anyways, the King of Wands here. Let's see some Kings of Wands that I liked in my tarot decks in particular. Not to say that there weren't, like I said, there were other kings, but these were just the ones I tended to like the best. I don't know why. Okay. And that one, and then some of these. Okay. So let's look at these a little closer. This is, again, the Darkwood Tarot. I've already talked about the Darkwood Tarot having very good court cards, in my opinion. You can see the passion of this King of Wands. Why is my brain getting scrambled here? You can see the passion of this King of Wands. You could literally see like fire coming behind him. But he also just has like a very interesting, expression on his face to show his passion. So for me, this works. Interestingly, the King of Wands, as you can see, is also a lot in tarot associated with lions. I don't know why, because again, like it's also shown here. This is the Guided Hand Tarot. Oh, by the way, this is the Lion Strider Mini Guided Hand Tarot. And you also see a lion in the 5 Cent Tarot, right? But I don't know. It's just a very common thing. Maybe because like Leo energy, maybe, I'm guessing. I do like the keywords on the 5 Cent Tarot too, though, because you see born leader, vision and intent, success. But it does point out some of the more negative qualities. Like sometimes they can be poor leader, right? Unrealistic or overbearing. These are just some things, but these are some good tarot examples there. There's also, interestingly, this is the King of Wands from the Everyday Witch Tarot. And I do like this one because this kind of harkens back to the Queen, the keyword I've given for her being a strategist. So he's like also somebody who plans out his time, but he's more patronly, in my opinion. I don't know. So there's that. Some other King of Wands here that I really like. Again, smaller selection. But I do think, for instance, like when they do point out some of the fiery energy of the king, I do like these very much. Like this is from the Tarot of the Divine as a phoenix. This makes a lot of sense to me. Or Firebird, maybe. I think it's a Firebird if it's not the phoenix. This one is from the Carrot Tarts Tarot. This is the King of Wands. He's literally like on fire in the background, but he shows his energy. You wouldn't mess around with him, basically. This one from the King of Wands, this King of Wands from the Raven's Prophecy Tarot might seem like a weird choice if you don't know this deck, but I love this card because what it talks about is, in the guidebook, Maggie Stiefvater mentions that the King of Wands, right, has these magnificent antlers, and the thing about having antlers so big is that you have to be careful how you swing them, you know? So it's like understanding how to be like very balanced. So yeah, I liked that. And even, but for an interesting negative, I guess, connotations of the king, you could see, right, Jafar from the Disney Villains Tarot. I mean, he was very ambitious. Very creative in his endeavors. It was a magician, you know, but all his scheming, right, ended up going towards like a very negative direction. Like he could have been a great mentor, helper, advisor of the king, and he was for a while until he got too ambitious. So there's that. But yeah, these are some tarot examples, but just like the rest of the series, right, I do have characters for this today. And these might be, I don't know if you guys can see these. These might be interesting choices if you don't know who they are. And, there's only 3, by the way, now. Because I realized in that Queen's video that the Kings, you know, it was too much, okay? The Queens had 4 characters, and that was just a lot to talk about. So anyways, the first character we have here is Patches O'Houlihan from the movie Dodgeball. If you've seen it, oops, sorry. If you've seen it, you've seen it. We also have Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. And we also have Moiraine Sedai from the Wheel of Time show. I'm going to specify the Wheel of Time show because I have not read the books, just watched the show. So this is just based on that. But first off, what I have to say about these characters is like what they have in common, in my opinion, is that they're masters of their crafts, right? Patches is the master of dodgeball. Gandalf and Moiraine, you know, have more of that magic vibe going on, but they are masters of what they do, right? Their other commonality to varying degrees is that all 3 kind of take on mentor or patronly roles so that those around them can become great, right? Especially, they also each do have to show their fire once in a while, especially with Patches. I think Patches is probably showing it the most and maybe Moiraine the least of them, but they can all have their fiery, you know, moments in between, right? This archetype too is probably one of my most favorite, along with the one I'm going to talk about next. Just because, and you know, I hope that the more I age too, I can embody this king because they're just an interesting cast of characters. Like Patches, right, being a mentor of the men who want to save their like dodgeball. No, sorry, they want to save their gym, right? So he takes on that dodgeball mentor role, even though he takes it to very extremes. I mean, Gandalf, we know, right, had to help kickstart the Return of the Ring, and then Moiraine trying to save, what is his name? I cannot remember in the show, but like trying to help him out, right? All this shows that they are very much patrons, but they're good examples of the King of Wands, in my opinion. Okay, we are next going to talk about the king that has been my personal significator in the suit of air for a while now, which is the King of Swords. Elementally, this king is double air, okay? Which means that people can, okay, how do I explain this? It means more that like this card tends to get represented in different ways because of the double air, right? You get people who see it as King of Swords being extremely logical, but at the same time, I see the King of Swords as someone who's intensely inward because of just how well they understand their own mind and kind of like the minds of others. See, the thing about the King of Swords is that they're figures who have studied people, right? They've been through trials and tribulations, and because of that, they also know how best to act when, right? They're very careful in the way they act, the King of Swords, right? It's not, I'm not going to say, again, with all the kings, it's not a perfect system, but it's definitely not a perfect system, by the way, if they're a King of Swords who ignores their emotions, right? But because they are capable of being so detached and fair, I want to point that out, being detached and fair, they are usually reliable figures. So that's the thing with the air, right? But of all, I would say that the King of Swords is someone who values truth, justice, and fairness, which is why my keyword for them is also the diplomat. They're aware of how other people's mental and emotional landscapes can be. So they can take those into account and end up being mediators a lot of times for others who either cannot detach from their way of thinking or from those who get too emotional, right? So very helpful to have a King of Swords personality around. Again, right? It's because they understand and may even have empathy for others, but equity has to come first. So that's usually something that to consider too. Now, when it comes to tarot, I have way too many, but I'm going to point out some that I like really appreciate as we go through this. So let me just put some of these out and I'll explain. The King of Swords, though, I love the King of Swords, but yeah, there's a lot of different interesting ways of like how the king has been depicted. The most common thing you guys might see as I'm putting out these cards is that the King of Swords is usually shown with obviously a lot of sword imagery, but also a lot of aviation kind of things. Yeah. As you can see, there's like literally a vulture in this King of Swords from the Darkwood Tarot. This King of Swords also has their sword ready, right? Very serious expression. But the thing I want to see, so most commonly, the King of Swords, a lot of times, I'm just like spilling my cards everywhere now, is usually seen as a figure that flies, right? So most common thing I see is that the King of Swords, interestingly, is shown with an owl. And I think that's probably because owls traditionally, in at least Western society, have been seen as figures of wisdom, right? So, but usually there is some kind of other bird. Like this is, for instance, a griffin. And I love this card from the Tarot of the Divine. One of my favorite figures showing the sword. This person, I love the mediation here of like getting the butterflies to them so that these birds can feast. Really funny one there. But all these, as you can see, they have the sword ready. I like this. Oh, this is from the Starseeker Tarot. I really actually like this King of Sword because you could see him in meditation, but the sword is ready, right, to pass on that judgment. These two kind of show the same vibe too. This is from, why am I blanking on the name right now? Spark and Pen Tarot. Sorry, I don't know why I was blanking. These two, right? Their swords are ready. I like the explanation of this one once again from the Raven's Prophecy Tarot though, because this one is the sword that is sheathed. So it's not, when the judgment is passed, they're not just swinging their sword wildly, right? The sword is sheathed. But if the sword needs to be let out, it will too. So a lot of that kind of imagery, gung-ho-ness, right? Law and order, discipline, authority. Even the caterpillar in the Wonder World Tarot is wielding a sword, right? This one's the most severe you can see of the king kind of passing down judgment, but there's that. Oh, I also liked this one from the Botanica Tarot, because this one talks about samurai, and if you know anything about samurai, you also know that they very much care about law and order and fairness. So I just really like this card. But out of all these, I have to say my favorite tarot example still comes from the Monsoon Tarot. This is by far the best way of showing the King of Swords. So, well, this shows as King of Air, but the reason why, oh, I'm sorry, this lighting is just like getting to me. Give me 1 second. I think I'm going to try to fix it. Okay, fixed it. Oh my God. That was bothering me. Anyways, the reason why I think this is the best depiction of the King of Swords is because you can see the king there, right? The king is doing their work, doing their business, but they literally have to hold this cat back from snapping and trying to take this bird that's flying away with messages, you know? It's the idea that the king doesn't hold their hand like rudely. It's very firm and sturdy, so the cat can't get away. But it's also with some empathy and kindness. And I think that's why the King of Swords in my mind are very good diplomats. They have to be aware of other people and other things, you know. So yeah, that was the King of Swords in tarot. But let's talk characters, right? Let me see if I can do this right. Oh, I don't know. I thought I was going to be able to make it so that you can't see the other ones, but this might not go. This might not go today, but it is what it is. Anyways, we're going to try this. Okay. These are my 3. Let's look at these a little closer. Okay. We have Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars universe, right? We have Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas. And we also have this statue, which is actually supposed to be Odysseus from not only the Odyssey, right? He was in the Iliad, Greek myths, all that jazz, right? Now, why did I choose them, right? Okay. All 3 of them, in my opinion, are, first off, masters of the mind and in dealing with other people. They are all kind of quick-witted and maybe even quick-tongued at times so that they can survive to see another day. I would say Obi-Wan and Sally, you can argue, could even be actually in the King of Cups as well for how in tune they are with their emotions. But I kind of see them more in the swords for me personally because they have like mental clarity and they have fairness in them more. Like it's not just all based on emotions or dealing with other people's empathy, if that makes sense. But overall, all 3 have had to navigate kind of dangerous waters at times to get themselves and others what they need. And for that reason, they're also King of Swords, especially Odysseus, who I think is the most out of all of them because if you know anything about the Odyssey, he kind of had a crazy adventure. And you could even say at the beginning of his journey, he wasn't quite a King of Swords yet. Maybe he was more a Queen of Swords. But by the end, he is definitely the King of Swords. He has to navigate a lot to get to the end and to get home to Ithaca. Definitely have to apply logic and deal with all kinds of different people. So for that reason, I think that all 3 of these are King of Swords. And by the way, you might be questioning Sally a little bit, but don't question her. Like, go back, rewatch The Nightmare Before Christmas. She is actually very smart. There was a lot of things she just had to put up with, especially with that, I can't remember his name, but that guy she had to like oversee, that scientist dude in the wheelchair. A lot of stuff with that. So yeah, all of them, in my opinion, are great examples of King of Swords energy. Okay, next up, we have the King of Cups, who elementally is both air and water, just like the Queen of Swords. But the difference between them is that while the Queen can be more watery and emotional, right? The King is tempered by their logic and life experience, okay? It's for that exact reason that my keyword for this King is the composed, okay? Now, don't be fooled, however, right? Just because I say the composed. Just because they know how to stopper their emotions doesn't mean they don't have any. I want to point that out right now. It's not that at all. In fact, I would argue that the King of Cups feels very deeply with even high amounts of empathy, right? For the world around them and others and all that jazz, right? For them, it's more a matter that they've learned that not all situations require their whole heart, right? And they do need to have some restraint when you go through life, right? You can't just always be swinging around from one emotion to the next. But it's also because of their empathy and high wisdom that I would argue that King of Cups people make the best kind of listeners and confidants, because they always manage to give somebody the advice they need to hear at a given moment. You would even say, I mean, I would argue this, but this is just my opinion. I'd even call them kind of like old souls, because they're deeply invested in the future of humanity and keeping light and hope in the world at the same time, right? They just like to do that kind of more with balance and grace. So for tarot examples, I have a lot, actually. I do like a lot of King of Cups, like when I see them. Sorry, I'm going to like try to put this more into frame. I do like a lot of depictions of the King of Cups. Interestingly, like I said, like Gandalf is in here. I do like him from the Lord of the Rings tarot as a King of Cups too, because you can see that Gandalf does have a lot of empathy also, but I do see him more as, I do see him more as the King of Wands. But there's some really interesting depictions of the king. Usually, as you can see, you might be noticing a trend here, is that like the king, very water-centric imagery. A lot of fish involved sometimes with the king. In this case, though, interestingly, it's an elephant, but that's just because of the suit. More ocean imagery, right? Or ocean-like beings. Darkwood Tarot again. Line Strider Tarot. Everyday Witch Tarot. Very strong ocean imagery. But some of my favorite kings out of this bunch, I do really like still the King of Cups this is from the Northern Animal Tarot. I think the reason why I like this King of Cups so much is because the eyes. There's something about the eyes of this card. Do you just get the sense of like how calm they are, how ready they are to listen, how much empathy they have. It's done very gracefully and simply, and I love it. Another thing this is from the Eldritch Overload Tarot. I really like this King of Cups. I believe the cups have been renamed potions. So I really like this one because, well, one, as you could see, it's more a female presenting figure, so that's really cool. I also just like how she kind of tinkers and goes about her things, but she has a lot of wisdom and clearly intelligence, right? Like her face is ready to listen and do things too, so that's really cool. I also like... I like this one from the Monsoon Tarot because you can see that like the key isn't behind. Their heart might be locked up at times, but at the same time, they're ready to listen and give emotions. I also like, this is kind of where, interestingly, this is the Practical Magic Tarot. They actually say the King of Cups is the diplomat, but to each their own, right? Everyone can have different interesting thoughts there. This King of Cups is the Disney villains. This is Captain Hook. He's an interesting take, right? In the other direction, the more shadowy side of things is that he feels kind of way too much and lets his emotions go all the time, right? To the point where he becomes very self-centered. So this is kind of like the dark side of the King of Cups, but it's always good to show those dualities, right? So these are just some interesting tarot examples of the King of Cups. Now for characters, characters a little harder. Well, not harder, actually. It was kind of easy to figure out characters, but let me try to explain them the best I can. So first off, right, We have Aang from Avatar The Last Airbender. We have Usagi from Sailor Moon. She is Sailor Moon. And we also have Wonder Woman from the DC universe of movies, I should say, obviously, because this is Gal Gadot. Now, of this list, you can definitely make the case that Usagi for sure starts off as the Page of Cups. And I would even tell you, yes, 100%. She starts off her journey as a Page of Cups for sure, especially if you've seen any of Sailor Moon. But I would argue by the end of Sailor Moon and her journey, she's definitely the king, okay? Of this list too, Aang, I think, is the most obvious example of what you think the King of Cups would be, right? And this is because he's the most kind-hearted of souls, and he feels very deeply and is undeniably strong too, and also obviously the master of the 4 elements, but they are also master of their own emotions, and of course Wonder Woman, right? Like, super strong. Also, Usagi also feels deeply again, and at the start of her journey is that Page of Cups, but she learns how to master herself, her emotions, and her powers by the end, because at first she's very uncertain. And then, of course, Diana, right? Wonder Woman. She mainly reminds me of the king from Gal Gadot's performance of her from the movies I've seen so far, right? Diana feels deeply. She cares so much for others, but is also so poised and graceful and an obvious master of her abilities. Basically, right, this cast and the kings in general are examples of kindness is a strength, right? Kindness is strength. Just because a character is warm does not mean that they are weak at all. And that's another hallmark, in my opinion, of the King of Cups. So I just wanted to point that out because I do really admire the King of Cups. And I don't want it to be shown as like, just because it's these characters means they're pushovers, because obviously they are not. Okay, finally, guys, we are on the last king of this video, the King of Pentacles, okay? Elementally, this king is both air and earth, which mirrors the Page of Swords. But unlike the Page, the king is more grounded and not as interested in being cutting or quick-witted with their words. In fact, I would argue this is a king very much concerned about the physical realm, and especially in the sphere of work and priorities. Specifically, my keyword for this card is the delegator, and I want to explain this one a bit, okay? The king is someone who has been through life, tried on a bunch of different roles, and, you know, or maybe by now, at that point of their time, they have become the leader or boss of their own business or enterprise and is seen as the master of that. But because they are the boss, not just like the boss of a small section, like the Queen of Pentacles, right? For instance, because the Queen of Pentacles, I also gave the keyword of the boss or even the provider. The reason why is, let me backtrack. They are the boss. The king is obviously the biggest boss. And because of that, they can delegate more to others and they get to sit back while their riches accumulate without them having to do too much more, right? This is also why this card typically shows a person surrounded by abundance and excess, because the king really doesn't have to do much now to keep that business flowing as usual. They're confident in what they've achieved and they know how to get others to reach their goals as well. They're definitely someone you want to have around, either at work or just in general in life, right? Now, here are some tarot examples of this card. Usually when you see tarot examples, the most common thing is, well, like the Caratarts Tarot, you might see the king as someone who's very earthly, because that's a common depiction. But also, actually I have a couple things, but yeah. As you can see, the most common characteristic with this king is that there's a lot of earth imagery. You usually see the king with a bunch of grapes, right? A bunch of grapes, or wine in general. But the king, earth again, is also someone just with a lot of excess. And so I kind of want to talk about some of these a little bit. These are some more examples, the small, right? More excess, earth, interesting way to show earth, but it's in the dark way. Even the Practical Magic Tarot, right, talks about their keyword being the boss babe for this. Like they're just sitting back while their riches accumulate. Now, some examples from these that I really, really like and want to draw some attention to because of how different and interesting they are, in my opinion. And just showing some of this, okay? Like, because some of this shows these three, actually, I'll start with this one, but these three show the more negative sides of the King of Pentacles when you are someone who is a boss and just lets your riches accumulate. This is the King of Pentacles from the Dungeons and Dragons Tarot. This king is renamed the King of Charisma because for some reason, charisma is that suit. I don't 100% agree with that, but we're moving on. This is a bard, okay? And if you know anything about bards, they are very masterful and they can be quick-witted, but they like the pleasures of life and they are someone who knows how to get by and inspire others and delegate, right? They are basically the ones providing strength and stamina to their teammates to keep going, right? That's what bards do. They sing others to get their jobs done. So it's an interesting way to show delegation, which is why I want to point this card out. Ooh, Raven's Prophecy. I did also want to point out this King of Pentacles, which is the King of Coins in that deck. This is a rose. And as you can see, this rose has very potent thorns. The other thing with the King of Pentacles that I don't want people to misunderstand is that even though they sit back and let accumulate their riches and they like the pleasures of life, you do not cross this king still. They have thorns. They are sharp. They will get you if they need to, especially if it's for business, which is why I want to talk about these three cards in particular and why I think they're great tarot examples. First and foremost, this is from the Literary Tarot. This is Dorian Gray from the picture of Dorian Gray. He is very much how the King of Pentacles can become very, very distorted, right? To keep your youth and your excess and your joys of life, you're literally getting old and turning into a monster in the background, right? So being careful about how you balance out your time and not letting your business take over your life, right? Same could be said for King, what is his name? I know his brother is Richard. This is from, this is once again the Disney Villains Tarot, but this is from the movie Robin Hood. And I'm trying to remember what his name was, but he is definitely a king who only cares about the gold, right? He is taxing people up the wazoo and taking their money away because he wants it all, basically. So the darker side, once again, of the King of Pentacles. This one's also very interesting because this King of Pentacles, right, once again called the King of Coins in the Eldritch Overload Tarot, this is a mafia boss. I'm pretty sure he looks like a mafia boss, right? Or like some kind of boss of an enterprise where liquor might be involved and other things. So again, some of that darker energy of like, there's a lot that could be said about being like a crime lord boss or, you know, some kind of boss of that nature. So these are the darker sides of the King of Pentacles, but overall they do delegate and run things as efficiently as they can. Now, let's talk characters, right? Because these ones are going to be interesting. I don't know if you guys will recognize all of them, so I am going to try to explain the best I can. Okay, first we have Silco, and he is from the show Arcane, which you can see on Netflix. This is Willy Wonka from the original, in my opinion, and probably best Willy Wonka, all right, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie. And this figure here, for those who definitely might not know, this is Ozpin from the web show Ruby, okay? Of these three, I would say that Silco is obviously the darker side of the king. Someone who delegates and runs a huge crime ring, right? And is also corrupt now due to the power they've received We also have Willy Wonka, who is, he's funny because he's both a competent businessman and someone sitting on their riches, living in excess with their confection creations, because he's reached excellence in candy making. There's not much more he can do. And interestingly, because he comes to that dilemma, that's why he starts, doing the whole golden ticket thing. So he's a really interesting example of the king at work. And then, of course, we have Ozpin. Now, even Ozpin, right? He's the headmaster of a university that teaches students how to hunt monsters from fairy tales, right? And he could have only been able to become headmaster too, right? Because he is one of the best in his field, and he knows how to delegate and lead for others, right? So in my mind, what's funny about them, as you can see, they're all like wearing suits too and like have canes. I think that's hilarious. I don't know why my brain came to that assumption, but it did. But yeah, anyways, I'm going to end this here. But this is not the end of the series, okay? The last video, there will be one more video. Yes, the last video in this court card series will be an examination of how to put this all into practice. Now that I've talked about what every single card in the courts mean and how I see them as character studies and all that jazz, how do you actually interpret them into readings? So stay tuned for that one. But for now, I'm going to peace out. Bye, everyone.